Hello everyone, good morning. Welcome to today's webinar. Here we are going to discuss how to deploy multiple services using Docker Compose with you in association with ValueBound, your partner in digital excellence. I am Sachin Nisad and I will be your host for this session. I am delighted to kick off today's webinar by introducing you to ValueBound first, a leading full-service digital agency that stands out in the industry for our specialization in Drupal development and our unique ability to harness the power of cloud infrastructure. At ValueBound, we believe in harnessing the power of cloud infrastructure to unlock the true potential of Drupal. As an AWS Advanced partner, we have recognized expertise in AWS, enabling us to deliver cutting-edge solutions and seamless integration of cloud technology. Our comprehensive range of services caters to diverse needs of our clients. We provide end-to-end solutions, including design, development, maintenance, and support for enterprise web solutions. Our team of experts is committed to delivering exceptional outcomes that drive your digital success. With a proven track record, we have successfully delivered high-quality and scalable Drupal solutions to our clients worldwide. Our focus on quality and innovation has ensured us the trust of organizations seeking reliable and impactful web solutions. Innovation is in our core of our DNA. We are dedicated to driving digital transformation through Drupal, pioneering solutions that empower our clients to stay ahead in today's rapidly evolving digital landscape. By exploring emerging technologies, we ensure that you are equipped with the latest tools and strategies. At ValueBound, customer satisfaction is our top priority. We place our client at the center of everything we do, striving to exceed expectations and build long-lasting partnerships. We work closely with you, understanding your unique needs and delivering tailored solutions that align with your business goals. So this is our table of content. Here we are going to discuss topics like what is Docker Compose. We will give overview of our application. Then we will try to identify the services we are using. After that, we will create Docker file of each of the services. Then we will create Docker Compose file to accommodate all the services. We will also gonna talk about dependencies in Docker Compose, inter-service communication. After that, we will update the environment of our application and then we will test. So what is Docker Compose? Docker Compose is a tool that allows you to define and manage multi-container Docker applications. It uses a YAML file to specify the services network and volumes required for your application, making it easy to configure and run multiple containers as a single application. With Docker Compose, you can easily spin up and scale complex applications with multiple dependencies, simplifying the deployment and management process. Application overview. So here I am going to give you the overview of the application which I have created for the demo purpose. So this is the code of the application. Here I have created a simple to-do application, and for that, for backend I am using Express.js, and for frontend I am using React.js, and for my DB I am using MongoDB. So let me run the application first. Now my application is running. Here you can see we have one input box, and with that input box we can add to-dos into the list. As you can see, test 6 is added, and it is also added in our DB, and we can also fetch the data from our DB. So this is the application which we have created for the demo. Next is identifying the services. So Docker Compose is basically running multiple services together. So before that, we have to identify the services. In case of our application, let's solve the application. In case of our application, we are using three services. One service is our backend, second service is our frontend, and the third service is our MongoDB, our database. So here we are using three services. Next is creating Docker file of the services. So before running each of the services together, we have to create Docker file of all the individual services. And for backend, here I have created a Docker file. For backend, I'm using Node 18 Alpine image. After that, I'm creating a work directory and copying all my backend files into the work directory. Then I'm installing Node modules and I'm exposing port 4000. Then I'm starting my application. So this is a Docker file of our backend to create the image of our backend. Next, for our frontend, this is a Docker file of our frontend. Here also I'm using the same image Node 18 Alpine. Then I'm creating my work directory. Then I'm copying all the files into this work directory. After that, I'm installing Node modules. I'm also exposing port 3000. Then I'm running my application. So this is a Docker file of my frontend. And for MongoDB, we don't have to create Docker file because we will going to pull it from the MongoDB hub, Docker Docker hub. So next is creating Docker Compose file. So after creating Docker file of all the individual services, now we can create Docker Compose file to run all the services together. So here I have already created Docker Compose file for this application. One thing we have to take care of is the naming of the Docker Compose file. Like the naming should be exact. Docker compose.yaml. We write our Docker Compose file in YAML format. So let's see how we can create our Docker Compose file. So first thing we have to write the version of our Docker Compose file. So here I have added the version. Next, we have to define all the services we are going to use together. So here I have added one parameter services, and after that I have to define all my services. So for frontend, I have given client name. Our first services is basically the frontend, and you can give any name. Here I have given client. After that, we have to define the build of our frontend. So for frontend, our Docker compose file is in frontend folder /frontend folder. So in build, I'm adding the directory of our frontend, our Docker file, which is inside our frontend folder. After that, we will give container name. This container name is important. I will tell you later why it is important. So after build, we will assign one component name into our services. After that, we will define ports we are going to use with these services, which is 3000. And one more thing, for frontend, to run our frontend into Docker environment, we have to add these two parameters, which is standard input open true and TTY. These two parameters is important to run our frontend in Docker environment. So after that, uh, here in case in our application, our frontend is depend on our backend, because all the to do we have added in our DB, we can access all our to do from the backend API only. So we have to add one more parameter, which is depends on. Why we added this parameter? Because our frontend is depend on our backend. So here we have to define depends on. I will tell you later why. After that, after our frontend, after adding the service of our frontend, we will add the service for our API, which is our backend. So for backend, I have given name API. You can give any name. I have given API, and then we have to define from where the build is coming from. So I have for backend I have created our Docker file in backend folder. So I have given the directory name of that folder. So I have added my build. After that I have defined container name, which is node API. For API I added one more parameter, which is restart always. Just in case our API crashes, it will restart it automatically. Then I have defined my ports information for the backend, which is 4000. And similarly, our frontend is depend on backend. Our backend is also depend on our DB. So we have to define that. So we have to add this depends on parameter, and here we have to add the name of our DB services. So as you can see, I have created DB services. So after creating front-end services and back-end services, we will going to create our MongoDB services. So here I am going to define our database services. Here I am given name database. You can give any name again. And for database, I am pulling the image from Mongo, from our Docker Hub. So here I have defined one parameter image, which is our Mongo image coming from the Docker Hub. Then I have assigned container name MongoDB, and after that I have defined the ports information of our database, which is a default port for MongoDB 27017. After that I have added one more parameter, which is volume. Since our database use some kind of storage, what this volume basically doing, in my local machine, in this directory, it is storing my MongoDB data. As you can see, I have created one folder. Let me show you. Project. As you can see, is home searching project and MongoDB backup. So here, as of now, it is empty because I haven't run our Docker Compose yet. So what this volume is basically doing, all the data of our DB, it is storing into our local machine in this directory. So that's why I had added this volume property, so that once we restart our Docker Compose, we simply persist our data. Our data won't be lost after we restart our application. After defining all the services, we are defining networks. And what this network basically do, here as you can see, our client, our API and database, everything is interconnected to each other. So we have to define a network property also. And for network I have given one name, which is merge network. Again, you can give any name. And for driver I am using bridge. What this parameter basically doing, in bridge parameter, what is it is doing, all it is creating a bridge network between our client API and our DB. So all three services can communicate with each other. So here as I have created a network, I have to add the network into each of our services where I want to use this network property. So I have added the network into our client, also in our API and also in our database. So this is our Docker Compose file. Coming to our next topic, dependencies in Docker Compose. As you can see, our front end is depend on our API and our API is depend on our DB. As we have added one key depends on, it basically defining this service is dependent on this service. And why we are defining it? We are defining it because when we run our Docker Compose file, it will basically run the application from top to bottom upwards. So in this case, it will run application. If we try to run our Docker Compose, it will first run client, then it will run API, then it will run DB, which we don't want it. We first want our database to run first, then our API should run first, then only our client will be able to work, right? So here, that's why I'm adding a depends property, because client is depend on our API is depend on our DB. and our DB doesn't depend on anything, so I haven't added a depend property. So this is a dependencies in Docker Compose. Next is inter-service communication. As you can see in our Docker Compose file, we have created one network property. What this network property basically doing, it is creating a network connection between all our services. So this is a main work of our network property. Our services can communicate with each other. Next is updating the environment. So we have created our Docker Compose file. Next we have to update our environment. So for front end, we don't have to update anything because our front end will communicate with the backend and our backend will gonna point to our local host only. But in case of backend, it was localhost previously, but in case of backend, our backend is depend on our database, and our database is not coming from the localhost. Our database, we have created one Docker service for it. So what we have to do, our backend should point on that particular Docker service. So instead of localhost, what I will do, I will add container name of that our database service, and our container name for our database is MongoDB. So for backend, I will update it to instead of localhost, I will point it towards MongoDB. So this is the main change we have to do after creating our Docker Compose. Next, we have testing the application. So here we have created the Docker Compose file, and as you can see, I don't have any image. Also, there is no container running. So now I will run all my services using Docker Compose file. So here you can see I'm in my project directory and I have my Docker Compose.yaml file. Now I will run all my services using Docker Compose file, and to do that we have to type the command as Docker Compose up dash d. This dash d we add because we want to run our Docker Compose of all the services in detached mode. So I will press enter. After pressing enter, what it will do, it will first go to our Docker Compose file. It will first try to create our client image, but our image depend on our API, so it will point towards API, but our API image is depend on the database. So first, what it will do, it will first create the database image. Since our database doesn't depend on anything, it will pull the Mongo image from Docker Hub. It will create the database image. After creating database image, it will create the API image, and after creating API image, it will create our client image, and it will run all the three services together using this network bits. So let me press the enter, and you can see here, as you can see, our Docker Compose file has created all the three services. First, it has pulled our DB image and created the DB. Then it has pulled our Node API application. Then it has created our image service for our React UI. And you can see the order of the services. It has first started the MongoDB, then it has started the Node API, then it has started our frontend. All because of this depend property depends. So this is what dependency do in our Docker Compose file. Now let's test the application. Here you can see one container is running, and inside that container three subcontainers is running. So all three, this is our services, our MongoDB API and our React UI. So let me test whether our frontend is running or not. So as you can see, our frontend is running. Let me add one data into it. So it has added, and it is also fetching the data. Now what I will do, I will stop this service. Now you can see I have stopped all the services. So currently no image is running. Now I will run my Docker compose file again. Our Docker services is running again, as you can see. And let me refresh the application, and we are getting the data. Now one thing is, we have restarted the application. Why our data is not lost? It's all because of this volume property. What this volume property has did, it has backed up all the data into this local environment. So let me show you. So this is the environment, and here you can see we have all our MongoDB files. So all this data is persisted into our local machine. So that's what volume basically do. It stores all the Docker data into your local environment. So this is how we run multiple services into Docker using Docker Compose. So this is how we run multiple services using Docker Compose. Let me summarize it. Uh, I have created one to-do application. For backend, I'm using Express.js, which is one service. For frontend, I'm using React.js, which is second service. And for database, I'm using MongoDB, which is third service. So what I have did, I have created first Docker file of my backend, then I have created Docker file of my frontend. After that, I have created Docker Compose file. In Docker Compose file, I have first defined the version, then I have created services, and inside services, I have created multiple sub-services, which is frontend, API, and database. An important thing we have to keep in mind, the container name, ports information, and depends on, and also the network. This few parameters are very important in Docker Compose while creating a Docker Compose file. After creating Docker Compose file, it is necessary to update the environment whenever we need it. In case of frontend, we don't need to update the environment because we are communicating with localhost only. But in case of backend, our to communicate with our database is situated in Docker environment. So we cannot communicate with our database with localhost. We have to communicate with our database with the container name. So that's why instead of local name, I have added container name of the database, which is MongoDB. This is how we deploy multiple services using Docker Compose. So thank you so much for joining the today's session, how to deploy multiple services using Docker Compose. If you have any question or would like to explore, we can assist you further. Please feel free to reach out to us in comment section. Have a wonderful day.